particular was in a classroom that spent 2 to 3 mornings a week in a nearby park, a very large park. And they gradually lengthened the amount of time they spent there and also the distance that they would go. Sometimes they'd just get to the meadow at the edge of the park, and sometimes we would get further into the park to an adventure-based playground that actually feels a lot like an outdoor classroom. It has a lot of fallen trees. It has an area with sand. It has an area with water. It has more dense forest areas. It has grassy areas, and a lot of things that have really been thoughtfully designed to support probably hundreds, if not thousands, of children who come through it every week in Brooklyn. I think just from my experience, having been in many different classrooms, and this is something that carries through no matter what is happening, but as soon as you are bringing the child out of that routine that they have gotten themselves familiar with, you need to make a plan for how to support them, because a lot of the kids who have sensory integration needs or are on the autism spectrum or have attention things, when their schedule changes, when their spaces change, it can lead to challenging behaviors. And so I benefit from just having to focus on one child. And so I can really think and plan for that one child and how I could support that child leaving the classroom and going out into the world. But that's in partnership with the parents or with the classroom teachers or the administrators, and thinking about how to make that a positive experience for the child. I've noticed a lot of children need support for like that energy, that extra effort to get to wherever they're going. A lot of the kids I work with have different type of diagnoses that also impact their gross motor strength. And so this is not a kid that could easily walk a great distance, but because they were motivated to get to that adventure playground, he was able to sustain himself in ways that you wouldn't see that type of sustained energy in the classroom. We also would make a plan for if he did have a tantrum, if he did have a need to be separate from the group, like how would we make sure that we maintained a safe ratio of adults to children. And so we would always add another person so that two adults could wait with that child. Sometimes that was a parent, sometimes that was one of his parents, or it was a floater or administrator would join us for these longer outings. But I think taking the time in advance of an event, an effort out of the situation into the world, can really reduce your stress in the moment. We didn't start immediately bringing this child or any other children out into a less structured environment. We really got to know them pretty well, and then as the year progressed and we felt more comfortable with them and could kind of predict what they might have needed and how they would respond to supports, then we felt more comfortable bringing them out into a bigger space or a bigger expectation. Yeah, but like I said, again, this is very anecdotally, but just in this urban environment even, the benefits that I've seen for all of the children spending significant amounts of time in nature has been very positive.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm wondering if people have specific questions for Rachel or for anyone. I'm wondering, Rachel, if you have like specific tools that you've used that you found really useful.
Yeah, I always try to have kind of like a backup thing. With one child, I always used to bring a book with me. With another child, I used to always bring like a fidget toy with me. And so something that was familiar and something that could be used as like a break. The book was for a child who had mental and behavioral issues, and so if he did have a tantrum, having a familiar book, even in a place that was different, seemed to be helpful for him. For a child with attention, I mean, we were moving our bodies a lot, but if there was ever a time when we had to like be calm, we would have to wait to cross a street, wait for the light to change. And so in those situations, when he needed to be safe, he would have ordinarily wanted to move his body or run around. In that situation, I would give him a fidget, or I'd give him like a task to like count as many things of X as he could, to kind of distract him from what he was hoping to be doing at that moment, which was moving. Yeah, there's definitely a bag of tricks. I'm curious to know if people have experience in their settings working with kids with special needs, and how they've planned to integrate them into their program.
Hi, Rachel. This is Johanna from Lee, New Hampshire. And we are an inclusive setting, which is rather unique because we go into the woods. We're on a farm. And we don't have one-on-one assistance for setting children up for success. I find that one of the things that is really important is to get to know the child and meet their first hour needs. Sometimes it's food for children, sometimes it's deep pressure, sometimes it's 10 minutes to run with the dog. Other children need a job, an authentic job, but mostly we work on meeting the child where they are, figuring out what their unmet need or their untaught skill is, and then working from there to either meet that need so they can keep going, or teach the foundational skill so they can join us. There have been times where we have taken children with high sensory needs and worked all summer, and by the end of the summer, we take them on a hay ride in a wagon full of hay. We have had children that have had extreme fear of dogs, and by the end of being in our program for just a summer session, will walk my dog up to meet their parents. I think one of the things to remember is that every child, if you can plan your day to meet the needs of every child and to look at their behavior as a means of communication, not as they got up that morning thinking they were going to make your life living Hades, that it's much more successful. So I tend to get up in the morning and go, we are going to have a great day. And I have one child whose first hour need is to tell me a story. So for the first hour of every day, he follows me around going, Joe, can I tell you something? Hey, Joe, can I tell you something? And he needs that person to follow around and talk to. So those are some of the things we've done. We have children from 6 weeks old to 13 years old.
Wow.
And Johanna, can you say how many children do you have at any one time?
Yeah, we have 76 a day, 6 weeks to 6 years. And we have 55 a day before and after school, and no school days. So during the summer, we run about 55 children. Some summers we're up as high as 15 children being placed in our program from the public school for their extended year program.
Yeah.
I just wanted to follow Joe if I could, because I think it's so cool that I haven't heard of your program or met you before. I went to the Antioch program, but I love that so much of what you just said is what I would have said, right? So we're an inclusion program. our goal is to have 30% of the kids who visit our program come from an at-risk category, which generally includes someone with a documented diagnosis, someone living below the poverty line, or someone who's experienced a traumatic event. So what our philosophy is very similar. So that tells me that it's probably, you know, we're on the right track with some of those things that we feel are very important. The first one is we always say behavior is a language. So they're just trying to communicate something. If they're behaving in a way that isn't what's expected, that's because they have a need, and we have to figure that out. And then the second thing that you said, I don't know if you said it exactly this way, but it's all about relationship. And forming a relationship with children so that you can figure out what their needs are. And they're going to be different with a lot of kids, and it'll be, it doesn't always look the same. And then I just actually recently learned about first hour needs, and through a book that Janine Fitzgerald wrote, and I loved that concept, because we often would have kids with really problematic behaviors. And what we started to figure out is once we got past snack, they were fine. And so what we realized is that once we get to snack in our program, we've met all of those first hour needs. And so we were like, oh, okay. So, and some of it might be physical touch, some of it might be movement, some of it might be hunger. But by the time we get in our program to that point, we've kind of met the first hour needs. And then the one thing that we talk a lot about is trust. Because I think, Rachel, what you said about the motivation is one thing that we recognize is that kids are often very motivated when they're in nature. There's usually something that each one of them wants to do in a natural environment. And so you get to do that when we can trust you. You get to hike to the beaver pond when we know you're not going to take off in the woods. You get to go in and hold a chicken when we know you're going to have a calm body and a safe body. And so just working on building trust, I think kids rise to what our expectations of them are. So
yeah, I think, that the relationship that you build time and time again, and so that I use the word trust and safe with kids a lot, and they're big concepts, but I think they're able to understand it, and they can feel in their body when they're ready to do that thing, and like they need help to recognize it and to feel that security in order to go forward into it. Like I had a child who like did not like our time in the adventure playground because every time it started with sitting in a wet, cold spot to eat snack. And I realized that very quickly because sensorially, he was not going to sit in a wet, cold spot. He was convinced that mud was the worst thing ever. He didn't want to be anywhere near mud. And so I said, you can come sit in my lap. You can always ask me to sit in my lap, and I will sit here, and you can sit on my lap. And just getting that first 5-10 minutes for him in a way that he felt secure enough meant that he was excited about the next time we came. He knew I would remind him as we walked up the hill, you can sit in my lap for snack if it's too wet for you. And then the very last day I was with him in the forest, he got muddy. And he is the kid who had avoided it, and I had reassured him, we can change clothes, you have good boots on, like all of the messages about how you can be muddy. But he wasn't really ready until the very end. And then he was so excited to do water that he just plowed through a pile of mud and then realized it later and was like, oh, Rachel, I have mud on me. I'm like, great, let's keep going. But yeah, meeting those first things that you're recognizing, I think, are so crucial because they also need to trust you. If they're going out and to do something like holding a chicken, which might be scary, or meeting dogs, which might be scary, they have to believe that you are there to keep their best interests at heart and to protect them. I think, it's interesting to also think about kids with physical disabilities and how to support their time in nature. So I don't know if anyone has more experience working with kids with more.
Rachel, you just got muted there. Can you say that last little part again?
I said I was wondering if people have experience working with kids with more physical supports necessary to go into the woods, or to go into a nature-based program. Like, how do you support a child who has difficulty with the physical aspects of it?
I can speak to that because I work with public school teachers, and we have made it a point to make sure that our forest days, or our eco days as they call them, are inclusive to all children. That we have had children with limited mobility or children who use wheelchairs.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had to come up with accommodations, and a really really beautiful part of that has been the other students in the classroom community being part of solving that.
Mm-hmm.
So in particular, one student who had limited mobility and was kind of back and forth between using a wheelchair or a walker, the students actually walked down through town to the local sporting goods store. And of course, this child was using a wheelchair, and they worked on retrofitting the walker for the winter time with skis.
Mm-hmm.
And so the store in town helped to do all of that, and it was a design project. So actually, it ended up being, this was with a first grade class, so it ended up being a lot of science and engineering. And the students came up with different designs and everything. And then there was a whole access point in getting into the forest where they had to build a bridge. So it actually became a big part of their learning for that year. In my role working with schools, the great thing is that there's so much, we have a lot of access to people in the school, and so more minds are thinking together on how to get these children outdoors, and then that is brought to the larger community, and we've been able to gain a lot of support, financial support in particular too. Also with this school in particular, a bunch of hammocks were donated for this child in particular, because being kind of in a group circle or a meeting time, sitting on the ground was not comfortable for them. So we would bring hammocks out every week and hang them up in a circle kind of like formation in the forest. And that way that child was able to participate, as well as some other children that definitely needed, maybe unknowingly needed a hammock to swing and soothe and be able to be up off the ground as well. So yeah, we've had a lot of success with accommodations and supporting children with different mobility issues.
Awesome.
Amy, can you speak to, when you say that, you know, working with the school and you have a lot of access to all these folks in the school, is that just part of the nature of ECO, or how is it that you're not just one person working with one grade in the school and so siloed, but that you really do have access to the other teachers and grades and administrators?
Well, it's kind of like, it's almost like a fanning out effect, right? Because even if it's a child who, let's say, might be on the spectrum, for example, and they have a one-on-one in the classroom, but then they need to report back to the special education department and their advisor, that these are new questions and new challenges in an outdoor setting. And really, honestly, all these children in particular love being outside and thrive being outside. There's always those beginning challenges, especially maybe with the clothing, as now we're moving into the colder seasons and getting dressed and kind of that tactile feeling. But in the end, these children, when they're outside, they're really thriving, instead of maybe opposed to just surviving inside. And our paraeducators and our one-on-ones, even if they are hesitant to the idea of spending extended periods of time outside, they are seeing the benefits for their students. I might also direct people to the North American NAAEE. I can never remember what it all stands for. North American Alliance of Environmental Educators. And within that, even if you just type in NAAEE and type in the name Susan Lancey, I'll say it again. I'll write it. Maybe I'll provide the link in the group chat. I don't know if people are using that, but Susan Lancey, she's a preschool teacher and also a special educator in a few school districts that I work with. And she quickly adopted a Forest Day model. I've been working with her for 3 years. And through NAAEE, she hosted a whole discussion on inclusivity in the outdoor classroom. And the chat thread is great, and she wrote a really wonderful article on it about her experience with preschoolers outdoors. So I just share that with you as a really great resource, and also someone who would be ready to answer questions at any time and share some of her stories.
Amy, if you email it to me or put it in the group chat, I can add it to the notes that'll get shared with everyone.
Sure, absolutely. I have a question too. And this is something that's been coming up for us at the Nature Center, in that we have a licensed preschool embedded at the Nature Center that has its own separate forest preschool director and everything. I work in the public schools with preschool through 6th grade, but specifically in Vermont, this with licensing and our STARS application, it's been hard to accommodate and support children with learning. I'm not going to say learning differences, because they're preschool children and they're all learning all the time, but more behavior and children on the spectrum that have been coming into our program. And because we're licensed and we're receiving Act 166 money for universal pre-K, we're actually required to serve these children, but in an outdoor setting. We've been really challenged. And as a small program that is not within a public school, our resources are limited. So I'm wondering if anyone has any suggestions or ideas or challenges that they've been able to overcome to be able to best serve those children in an outdoor setting.
We actually aren't a licensed preschool, we're a licensed camp. So we haven't come up against that at all.
I know a little bit about Vermont and kind of like how they would support students in a public program. Like, do these children have IEPs to go along with their because they're pre-K, they're 4-year-olds, right?
Yes, and because it's preschool, for some of these children, it's their first school experience. Mm-hmm. And so there has been no screening and no assessment. So we have children coming to us as a private program that accepts universal pre-K subsidy money for our families. Yeah. With children with, like, they are coming to us fresh, with opening their bags right open with all of their stuff. Yeah. And we're working with the parents too. And what's been hard is that in order to meet them, we need, for example, Washington County Mental Health or the Department of Education to come in and observe these children. And then they really need one-on-ones in our program. And there's no money to do that. There's no money to do that in a licensed preschool program that's not embedded in a public school.
Yeah, I will actually just speak to that a little bit. We're a nonprofit, so I wasn't quite sure. I guess I wasn't quite sure what the question was. I was thinking something else, but we have kids who, like, they might go to an integrated preschool and receive full services for Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but then they come to us on Tuesday, Thursday, and we're, again, this is tough, because what I'll just tell you is we're a nonprofit. We've just made it our mission that we're going to go find the money. So actually, Esther's on this call right now. She last year was pretty much a one-on-one for a little boy, and we just were committed to serving him, and we just were committed to finding a way to go get the money and make sure that we could do that. I do think for us, we've found that their behaviors are probably reduced here versus what they look like in a classroom. So they might not need as many accommodations. But yeah, we've just said that this is going to be who we are, and we're going to we're going to figure it out. And that's not probably the answer that you want, but there are, like, you know, I think there has to be ways of finding the funding, you know what I mean? Like, whether it's through private benefactors that you can say, you know, we have this amazing program and we need to be able to host these kids and give them what they need, and the money isn't in, you know, the regular budget or whatever, if you will.
So I wonder too, for folks who work in New Hampshire, you know, when I had children who needed extra support, that it wasn't on us to fund those services. The children either, sometimes there was someone who came into our program and provided support, you know, whether it was behavioral or speech or otherwise throughout the day, or like Lisa said, they went to our public preschool the other days that they weren't at Wild Roots, or they went to get those services outside of their school day. And I wonder if that's true, if that's been true for anyone else.
This is Johanna, and that is what happens at our center. The public school is financially responsible for providing programming and services. After the age of 3, and early intervention is responsible before the age of 3. What we run up against is if they go to the public school preschool, integrated preschool program, then oftentimes the school district will say that's all they are legally responsible for. So we end up doing very similar to just in.
Johanna, you're cut out that last little bit. Can you say it one more time?
Sure. I said that the public school won't take responsibility if they're providing programming and all the services. So we just have to make it work. And it often is an administrator will jump in, or we will figure out at what points the child needs to have a break from the program and then rejoin.
I think it's kind of a universal thing that's happening. I mean, it sounds like in Vermont and New Hampshire, and then also in New York, I mean, we're finding it harder and harder to convince the Department of Education that children with this level of need benefit from being in the program of their family's choice, that they do benefit from being with typically developing peers. And the push has definitely been in New York State to move children out of integrated programs into center-based programs that are sometimes private, but mostly public, and have only children with special needs in their preschool classrooms. Yeah, so it has been a struggle. I know my agency, my service is paid for by the Department of Education, but we definitely have seen a decrease in per case hours, and we're always writing justifications to increase hours or request 12-month services versus just school year services, because of course preschoolers are in school year round. And then my agency does a lot of fundraising to pay for the inclusion preschool that they run, but also to support all of the other work that we do out in the world at many different schools. So yeah, it's no easy answers, unfortunately.
I just wanted to say something too, because it's a couple of people have brought it up. I was just trying to look on my phone for the article, but so everybody, we used to always say, you know, we were talking about this anecdotal evidence that kids with, you know, maybe problematic behaviors do better in an environment or are very successful in a nature environment. And so when we're looking at advocating for, you know, whether it's to go out into a public school and get, get some funding to help them be in the nature programs or whatever. There is now a study, a fantastic study, that I don't know if some of you might have already heard this, but it's do experiences with nature promote learning, converging evidence of cause and effect relationship. And what it talks about is what I think all of us see, is that not only are children with challenging behaviors successful in nature-based programs, they're often leaders in nature-based program once you get through the initial wow, you can let me run wherever I want, and they're, okay, you have to stop now, they just keep running. But once they get settled into where they are, again, they are often leaders. And so I'm going to try to find, oh, did someone find the link? I'm going to try to find the link and put it in the comments if I can figure out how to do that. But that is this is the study that we're using now to go and look for that money, because it's not just us saying we think these guys do great. This is basically taking all of this information that we all have accumulated and saying, guess what? This is legit. These kids are not just successful, but they're leaders, and this is a way to engage them once you go back into the classroom as well.
I mean, this is anecdotally, but the child that I work with who had experienced trauma and had a lot of behavioral needs following that, he and I discovered that we both love taking care of street trees in New York City, and he had difficulty focusing more than 10 or 15 minutes at a time, but we spent literally 2 hours one afternoon taking care of street trees on his block, and he was incredibly dedicated through this entire enterprise because he wanted to be there so much. And he actually brought back that experience and shared it with his classmates, and they got excited about that too. And so for him to feel successful in this outdoor setting, and then to bring that feeling of success and pride back to the classroom, just rippled out and really impacted how he saw himself in that community.
I hate to follow a beautiful, happy story with a couple of sad ones, but Ann Stiers, Juniper Hill School, this has been a tremendous challenge for our school. And not only, like many of you I know, are in rural areas, but I'm definitely in a rural community that I don't exactly know the percentages this year, but we've been between 25 and 35 free and reduced lunch families. Majority of our families are publicly funded, and the 25%, the rest, that brings us up to about 87% of them are funded by the school in one way or another. We pay them to do jobs, etc. The families don't have any money, and if they are not able to get past their own sorts of blind spots in working with us to identify needs that some children have, we've had to counsel out children. It's the most heartbreaking thing, and it happened in September this year for us. At the end of September, beginning of October, we've been working with a family for over 2 years with this child, and it's heartbreaking and awful. And I think that there's so many of stories I'm sure we could all share with that. And we've worked with another family who couldn't afford to help us to figure out, it's like mid-year, and behaviors were really affecting the climate of a classroom, and we really needed to find money. We need to find it like super fast. So I'm wondering, as the needs sort of increase for this child based on family structure and some traumatic events that were happening for him, in addition to his already a diagnosed oppositional and some spectrum pieces, we were very, very challenged as a school. We just run on an absolute shoestring, and I just don't know. Is there anyone else who's been in a situation like mid-year or tried to work with a family who's super resistant and be able to find it and have a happy ending? Because we've had a couple of super sad ones. We've had a lot of positive ones, but of course the sad ones hit harder. So I just didn't know if anyone had any experiences there that they could share with those quick fixes and what they've learned from that. So.
I think when families are resistant, that's a challenge too, because there are, if kids have diagnosis too, there are ways to pull in even some supports from, like they could have family supports that could join children in the program. But if a family's resistant, then you're in kind of a difficult situation. The other thing is that I think the conversation, this isn't something that's going to happen now, but I think the conversation needs to start happening that we need to be able to get public funding into these programs. We actually just successfully, we have a custody of our granddaughter who experienced traumatic events, quite a few of them, and we somehow just got our public school to support her at Janine Fitzgerald's Institute, which is a nature-based elementary school. I don't know how we did that. I don't know how long it'll last, but I think initially they recognized that Isabella will do better there. And so they can spend a lot of money with her escalating behaviors in their public school, or they can support her in a program, because that's what happened to us is they came mid-year and said, we don't think we can keep doing this. Would you like to pay for an aide? And I was like, I can't afford to do that. And somehow we were able to work this out. So I think this is very unusual what happened to us, and we're so grateful. But I think that somehow we need to keep having this conversation with public schools that, you can put this child in your program that isn't a good fit and spend a lot of money while their behaviors escalate, or you can spend, putting Isabella in a therapeutic day program would have cost them $58,000 a year. And what they're doing is supporting an aide in a program that we're already paying for tuition, which is less than $20,000 a year for the aide. So finding ways to help public schools understand that it's actually going to be cheaper for them to support a child in your program than for them to put this child in a public school, whatever their needs are, they cost a lot of money. So anyway, and that's not something that's going to happen now, but that's, again, all the work that everyone's doing with nature-based programming, trying to get public schools to get their elementary students outside, doing all those things. This is another conversation that needs to be added to that work.
Lisa, I want to add to you because I know your story. Can you hear me? That situation with Isabella going and getting an aide was well documented. There were, you can talk more about this, but I wanted you to bring this up, that there were documented reports, there were all sorts of specialists brought in to give her the documentation and the background that she needed for Lisa to come through and ask for an aide to be brought into that. You might want to talk about that.
Right. So she was actually unsuccessful in the integrated preschool in our district. It was a disaster, and her behaviors were escalating all the time. And so we just pulled her out and put her in our program, and that was successful but difficult because I'm her grandmother and she's living with me and I'm running this program. So she was a little like, so then we found the Fitzgerald Institute, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And she did well there. She did better there than almost anywhere. But then again, her behaviors were going beyond the scope of what they could handle because they're a small school. And so this is where I was talking about the resistance of families. So we got a really solid neuropsych for her. We, documented the lack of success in their early childhood program, the lack of success in a supposedly fully trauma-informed elementary school and kindergarten. And so we had all of that. We were documenting all of that. So if you have a child in your program, or both ands actually, starting the documentation and really finding ways to be able to go to collaborators, whether it's a public school or even local agencies who could support families through their home. Like we've had kids come with, ABA therapists with them, or therapeutic mentors, or family, like finding ways to get outside collaborators to go ahead and bring funding or support into your program. But it will only happen, well, first of all, it might not happen right away. Again, this is a conversation that we need to keep having, but there is a chance that a school district might recognize, even especially if you have a proposal, right? Okay, we have a child that from 10 to 2 has to have a second set of hands. We do not have enough staff. You know, we can handle him till about 10 o'clock in the morning, and then he kind of loses it and whatever. So from 10 to 2, it's going to cost you this much to bring the supports in, and you know, start to have those conversations. They might at first be like, no way, we're not going to do that. Or they might be like, all right, let's talk about this. And I think that what I want to see happen is I want to see as a, you know, as educators, us start to like really be pushing that, so that if I can say I have a success story here, that my granddaughter's being supported by a public school in a nature-based program, then another public school or another child, that might happen.
Lisa, you said you got a really solid neuropsych eval for her. Was that something that you guys did independently though? You paid out of pocket yourself, or the public school paid for that?
So we actually, our health insurance covered it, and I know that's not always the case, but I think at the point that we were at, the public school would have paid for it. We didn't need to have that done, but her behaviors were escalating so much in the public school that she was in at the time in kindergarten. We actually pulled her out of a kindergarten program in December because and we were looking at, okay, how much would it cost us to put this homeschool program together, you know, and we ended up finding this solution. And so, yeah, I think the neuropsych, so most public schools can't do anything without a neuropsych.
Right.
So
well, sorry, but I was asking because this part of what you were saying went back to the thing of having family support. And so it's just like, you know, if a family can pay for an independent evaluation in that way, you could get it through the public school. Or how great if you have a family who can pay for it themselves, or with, you know, that their health insurance will cover it.
Right. And I think the thing that makes me sad, and what we really kind of went at our school district about, is oftentimes public schools say, well, this child needs to go here and fail, and then we'll pay for this. And that's sad.
So I just want to be respectful of everyone's time because it's 7 o'clock. So if there's any one last thought or question that anyone has, or Rachel, that you want to sort of leave us with. And I'll also just let you all know that I've been taking notes, and I didn't record our introduction. Sorry, I missed that, but I did remember to hit recording at some point early on. So I'll share the notes and recordings and all these wonderful links and resources that people are including in the group chat. I'll put that together and get it shared on the website, and I'll include it in our November newsletter. If there are other resources that anyone wants me to include for folks to see, please let me know. I took some pictures of books and different resources that I've used and people I've worked with have used before with children, thinking about taking things outside that we don't have to think about getting ruined in the rain and snow. So I'll include those photographs and books. But is there anything else? I feel like this conversation can keep going for another several hours.
Okay. I just had one idea, and I think documentation is always really useful, but I think particularly for a child who has behavioral needs that need that extra support, a behavioral intervention plan, a BIP, is something that is a great document to use for yourself and for your team and your school, and also to be in contact with parents about, like, this is the behavior, this is how we're responding to it, this is why we think it's happening, and just collecting documentation around that. And then when you go to the school district, when you go through evaluations, you can say, look, this is what we're already doing. And it's something that everyone involved with that child can work on, just one behavior or a handful of behaviors at a time. And so it's a way of creating a powerful record of how that kid is progressing in your program. I can share, I have like a kind of a fill-in with tips on how to fill it in, and I can share that.
I sort of feel like I'm leaving you all on a cliffhanger here. But I hope that, I mean, I feel like this is rich conversation, and if we want to have, you know, like a follow-up, I'm happy to schedule a part B to this Zoom meeting, and anyone who wants to come back together and keep chatting, we could do that. I hope people got some helpful ideas, and just at the very least feel supported that you're not alone. We're all doing this work together. And I really appreciate everyone being here and sharing thoughts. And Rachel, thank you so much for taking the lead and getting us started tonight.
Excited to hear about how you are working with kids in your programs in the future too.
All right, feel free to email with questions or other resources. And otherwise, I look forward to see our next meeting. Oh shoot, I should know this off the top of my head, but I don't. I feel like maybe it's not till March. And in our next meeting, we're going to be talking about how to carry nature-based education up through the grades so that it's not this thing that solely exists in preschool and kindergartens, but can happen throughout an entire school. So yay. Thank you all for being here. Take good care.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, hope to see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Take good care. Bye. And Lander and Caitlin and Amy, are you guys gonna stay on? Yeah, okay. Enjoy Thanksgivings and November celebrations. Oops.
We don't have to be on mute because the meeting's over. So we can chat.
Cool. How are you?
I'm doing good. Wait, look who's with me. See my puppy?
Aww.
Oh.
So cute.
She gets to sit on the couch with me.
What's her name?
Teal. Teal, like the color.
Yeah, love it.
Even though she's white.
Yeah. I have a new kitten that I just got, it's like 3 weeks ago, and she's playing with my sock right now.
Aww.
Under the table.
I'll pick her up so we can see her.
Let's see if I can get her. Where are you?
I'm trying to remember. I kind of remember what we're talking about.
I know, it's been a while.
Right. I was like, oh wow. Is she completely black?
Yeah, so she's gonna be hard to see.
Oh.
She's just a blob. Let's see if I can turn up the brightness. There, you can see her eyes.
They're like, Teal, you want to see that? Oh. You see my kitty? You see that?
Do you guys mind if Karen hangs for a few minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Right.
Just eating chocolate.
Okay, yeah, I've got notes on that we're going to talk about ecological impact assessment. And hi, Caitlin, I didn't actually see you before.
Yeah, I didn't turn my video on because I was eating dinner and I didn't think people wanted to see me doing that.
I get it.
Yep. Part of the reason I'm curious to stay is because at my work at Nelson, at the Harris Center, I'm at Nelson School every Wednesday, and I'm their nature studies teacher. So I have each class. It's not like we're all out all day, but each class I take out for 50 minutes at a time. And we play along the stream, and I'm thinking about like, wow, we're like tearing this place up. What do I need to think about? Which is that's what you all are talking about? Is that what you all are thinking with ecological assessment? Or I'm not sure if that's...
I can give a background because I think it's through my work that it was through Lander, through me, and then that's been passed to other people too. But I can just give a reference with the training that I did in the UK when I lived in the UK for floor school leader. Part of our program documents, which included risk-benefit assessments and policies and procedures and, all the things that go with a program. But one of the documents that we were encouraged to fill out was an ecological impact assessment. And it was there's lots of different ways to do it. And even if you do a Google search for ecological impact assessment, there are templates that come up. And so there's no one way to do it, and it's adapted to places and people. But the framework that I was introduced to in the UK, I brought with me when I came to New Hampshire and integrated into the programs that I developed with Lander in New Hampshire. And then as I became connected with the organization that I now work for in Ottawa, Canada, oh, there she is, which is an organization that is really committed to truth and reconciliation with Indigenous people. They have adapted sort of the framework that they borrowed from the UK as well to a Canadian setting, and have collaborated with Indigenous people to change the language and the mindset that comes with it, and the way that we connect and talk about land. And so they have created an ecological impact assessment form for their training course that has been influenced by Indigenous facilitators as part of our team. And then Lander and I adapted ours based on that. So it's been through this sort of evolution of taking this idea of thinking about your impact on a place and putting measures into place so that you're not tearing it up. And now adapting it to the idea of it's not just about like, oh, we don't want to damage the land, but more about connecting with the land through a different lens. So, and also bringing forth Indigenous histories within that context, because land is so intertwined with people. So the current ecological impact assessment form that Lander and I were using, and Lander I think you probably still are using, has things like treaties and Indigenous names for places, and thinking about, for example, I know in the UK they talk about like biotic and abiotic, living, non-living, whereas through an Indigenous perspective, that's not the way that they divide things. And so there's more sort of life forms and things to work through of what's present on the site, what is actually here, let's get familiar with it, understand it through the seasons, because it changes. And then what are we doing to make sure that we're respectfully being a part of this space? So that's my long-winded introduction to ecological impact assessments.
That was really helpful. And Kaylin, I just wanted to say, I'm realizing this is Eli's mom.
Yeah, we have met.
I remember. Yeah, from Wild Roots.
Yeah.
And I pulled up both of the forms that you had shared with me at different times, and I see one was just edited 2 hours ago. And then the other one I think is the one that you had said, yeah, let's not share that. Let's have a conversation first and see sort of what makes sense at this point.
Yeah.
So does everyone have that form up? Is it helpful to look at it?
Yeah, I'd be curious to know what one you're looking at, because.
Okay, so let me remember how to share the screen with you.
Okay.
Because that's a thing.
Is that where it says share, that green thing down there?
Oh yeah, okay. There, can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Okay, this is what I have.
Okay.
So that was the newish one, I thought, and then this is the older one, maybe?
Yeah, that was the one that I had posted to Forest School, and then I took it down.
Okay, and I didn't share, it's just in an old email from you, but I haven't shared it with anyone.
Yeah. Yeah, the new one, so that, yeah, the one with the tracks logo, I think is the one that Lander and I adapted. And I believe if you just scroll down to the bottom of a page, it should have the footnote. Yeah. So just the bottom of one page. Yeah. So that's where we have reference form adapted from the Child and Nature Alliance of Canada, just to give credit to them, because it is highly, highly influenced by the form that they've created, or we've created. I'm now part of them, so it's a little confusing.
Yeah, so what's helpful?
I think that it's, yeah, so I think it's a really useful form personally, and maybe I'm biased because that has been part of my life for many, many years now because of the training that I did several years ago. And I don't know if Lander, if you have any comments to say based on the programs that you've now